Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. Welcome to Friday night's video and our second Master Series. I do believe this is the 86th video in our second Master Series, the 35th video on basic processors, and the 22nd video on reverb convolution. And this video we're going to talk about other types of reverbs and things like that. So first of all, welcome back. I hope you've been doing okay through the revolution and the pandemic and that you've survived so far. And we'll get right into it. So basically, what we're looking at is a couple different things. First of all, is that we have our convolution reverb is our focal point. So what other types of convolution reverb can we use as far as like what type of impulse responses? Well, there's lots of different ones. We've talked a little bit about that, but the primary ones and the kind of things that you should be focused on is things like, you have like spring reverbs and plate reverbs and things like that you can get impulse responses of that you want to incorporate into your library. The issue here with these, how much you work on them and how much time you spend on sculpting them and doing the things we've talked about with our other impulse responses, is that they are most definitely going to color the sound. So any type of impulse responses like that we're talking about, these kind of, old school responses or boutique responses from strange environments or strange unique techniques, is that they are going to color the sound. So the biggest thing you need to keep in your mind is that it's going to color the sound some. Now, across an entire mix or on one individual track that might complement it or make the whole mix sound like it's recorded old school or these kind of things are what you need to take into consideration. But there's lots of different ones. Besides just the simple things like plate and spring reverbs, old school types of reverbs, there's all types of boutique and special responses that you can, investigate and check out that might color your whole mix or some vocal some certain way. But just be careful you don't get wrapped up in that, and focus on doing a good job of sound sculpting and doing your tracks well the way you want them to sound, and let your convolution reverb put your stuff in the place it's supposed to be and body build. And we talked about echo effect in the last video to kind of finish it off, the spatialization application when we're dealing with, our spatialization. So that's a very simple concept that I want to keep that simple to where you investigate that and on your own, but you just be aware of the coloring of the sound, and that it's something that I don't do a whole lot anymore, but there has been some times that somebody requested and they really like the sound of a plate reverb or a spring reverb, or them recorded in the bathroom, in the toilet, I don't know, and it's got this funky cool sound that makes their thing unique, and that's okay, and that's all part of being an audio engineer, is sometimes finding something cool and unique that works, makes things a little bit different. It doesn't sound like it's been, cookie stamped, out of the, Billboard Top 40 thing, then they want something that sounds a little different, and that can get creative juices flowing. So I don't deter you from that, just be careful of the colorization of the sound. So next of all, when we talk about other types of reverbs, there's all kinds of different ones. First of all, there's simple reverbs. Like in my studio, I have like this little mix verb, right? And it can add a little bit of reverberation, and there's all kinds of varying degrees from very simple reverbs to very advanced reverbs. And some of them are basically digital, versions of reverberation, and some of them are trying to emulate, analogous reverberation techniques or applications. And so it takes a little bit of looking around, but there's lots of them that sometimes that it can work for you. Does that make sense? I really push the Convolution Reverb as your next biggest gun, and you can see how many videos I made on this second master series about your Convolution Reverb to make you understand how big of a gun I think it is for your production. But there's lots of these. And with experimentation and you becoming a better audio engineer, you may find uses for them. Most of the time, any type of another reverb, this is a room reverb, just a stock plug-in in my Studio One DAW that's trying to emulate a space. Or depending on how complicated the actual tool is trying to give you control to create a space that you're going to put on across a mix, or use, like we've talked about, using the Convolution Reverb, but trying to control it. Some of these do better than others. This is a key element that you really need to keep in mind, and you need to test the things. How good of a job is it doing? Is it doing the things all these parameters say it's doing, and investigating all the parameters that it's letting you, apply to the spatialization that's going through it, and how well it does it. But some of them have a lot. There are quite a few. You just keep in mind it's trying to give you how much control of creating a space to put your production in, and how good of a job it's doing. Because like my room reverb here, I used it for a long time, and I still think it's a great plugin. It's a really simple plugin, but it did a really good job until I really understood Convolution Reverb and the power that it gave me in controlling my environment. After cleaning things up so that, I had complete control of what's happening. So, they are definitely worth investigating as you become a better and better audio engineer. These tools can sometimes do simple things for you in simple applications to keep your things clean, or, that work fine. Depending on how good of a job you do as an engineer, sometimes you can get by with very simple things that just sound great. So just keep in mind what it's trying to do. And why I went to Convolution Reverb, because it's not giving me a three-dimensional space when I'm listening to two speakers. So there was no point in that. I'm trying to take a three-dimensional space, get it into a two-dimensional environment, in a stereo environment, make it sound as good as possible, where some of these things are not doing that. It's trying to show you that it is, but it's not. Does that make sense? Which can be good and bad depending. And depending on how much money you spend, there are lots of them, and the more time they spend on them, and the more investigation and studies put into it, that the better they will become. So I do suggest you keep up on them so that you know what's going on, what they're working on, because eventually that you will have a plugin like this that is better than your Convolution Reverb. That once you understand audio engineering, you can completely create your space from one of these plugins and have it come out better, cleaner, and just plain better, period, than your Convolution Reverb. But in my humble opinion, that's not here yet. But at your level, in your productions, you might use them sometimes. And for the type of production you're using or doing, that it's quite acceptable and sounds just fine for what you're trying to do. That you don't need to mess with all that other stuff, because it's not that delicate of a production. So keep that in mind. Sometimes I'll use plugins that I normally don't go to for certain applications because of what the production's trying to do, or what they're trying to do in the production, that it's going to actually fit the production fine. So that is something that takes time. Just keep the things in mind that we've talked about and really investigate the plugins so you understand what you're looking at. And you get into some other things, like there's one from Voxengo that it's called an Oldschool Reverb. Now this thing has all kinds of different things to adjust, and no matter, this is a simple one that was free from Voxengo, but the thing that I'm trying to show is that What it's trying to do is give you more and more and more and more control of your environment, so that every aspect of the environment that we've talked about or is inherent in any environment that you're able to control to some point. So it just takes investigation, understanding what they're trying to give you control of and how well they're doing it. The better you understand acoustics, meaning not acoustics the science of sound, but acoustics, room acoustics, that the better you'll be able to understand what it's trying to control, what it's trying to give you control of, and how well it does it. So that's investigation on your part. There are tons of them. Me making as much of videos on all of them would be ridiculous, since I don't really push them anyway. I push the Convolution Reverb so you can have total control of your environment. I've got almost 4 hours. It's like lecture kind of thing on this second master series on Convolution Reverb. So that'll give you an idea of how important and how big of a gun I think it is. And then you get into other things like really simple reverbs. This is some kind of matrix reverb from my computer system. Does that make sense? And there's a simple reverb like this. Is tons of them. Simple reverbs like this one from Softtube. I mean, there is a lot of them. And we have reverbs like this, that these are spatialization reverberations, this virtual soundstage. This thing is trying to put your production in some certain space. There is lots of different ones that are really expensive, really cheap, somewhere in between, that sometimes will actually convolve, like, this room reverb I was showing you and this virtual soundstage. So you might have some kind of reverberation effect that's similar to this, that's mixed with something like this that you can put convolution reverb in. It's also a convolution reverb. This is a type of hybrid reverb that eventually will get worked out to where it's very good, but it's probably going to cost some money, but they are optional, and some of them sound really cool and have really cool spaces with a lot of parameters that you can tweak to really get you exactly where you want it. The better of an engineer you get and the better you get in this environment, the more it will make sense why one little parameter turned just a little bit really is going to make the difference on what's happening. Because until you get there, it might not. You just be like, well, dude, I don't know. I'm going to spend that much time fussing with that. I don't hear the difference that much. But as you get better and take the things into consideration we've talked about in the second master series, that, does that make sense? And depends on what kind of production you're doing also. This is the second master series trying to become that next level master audio engineer, which means that you're going to want to keep up on this kind of stuff because eventually it will come to where you get a mix of this like room reverb and something like this and convolution, and it's going to be just phenomenal beyond comprehension. That is just like, wow, and to anybody who is a top-notch audio engineer will just be drooling over it. Oh yeah, dude, $53,000, but I don't care, dude. Oh yeah, you know what I'm saying? So until we can afford it, that it's like, well, I don't know. I use my convolution reverb. I don't have $53 bazillion, bro, right now. So, you know what I'm saying? So these things are really good to keep up on, investigate, and sometimes use in your production. But just keep in mind, I push really master convolution reverb. Once you master it, you will find yourself getting lost in all this other stuff a lot less until they come out with something that you see becoming something like I'm talking about, and then that becomes your go-to reverb, because it takes your place of your convolution reverb. It's mixing all those things together with you having complete and total control. So just keep that in mind. Other things we talked about were like with echo effect, but there's tons of other delay type of, plugins that you have. Beat delays, analog delays, cheap free delays like this Acon digital delay. There's like, Isotope, this digital delay thing from Isotope, the DDLY. There are tons of them. Now, these things sometimes delay, just a little bit of delay, can take the effect of reverberation, trying to keep things clean, but add some spatialization. This is something you need to take into consideration because it most definitely can. You can actually pull out, I don't recommend it, but it can make your production cleaner. You can get a little bit of delay going off things. It's going to add a little bit of mud over an entire mix, but it does not convolve and duplicate all the other things from the track as much to where it's like infused on it. Does that make sense? It gives a delay of it that makes it sound like you're doing reverberation work on it, but not really. You're just adding a little bit of delay on it. And it might be just a dun, 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 or dun, 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 and, really lightly in the background or something that's really even hard to perceive, except for over a mix, it might be, you're going to perceive it as some type of, spatialization that you're making it into a bigger room or in some specific size room, which is something to consider. So with all these things into consideration, that you really understand why I push the Convolution Reverb as your next biggest gun to have complete control of your environment. But there's lots of other types of reverbs, to experiment with and to really take into consideration. I really dissuade you from getting lost in that, except for, that eventual time when something like this virtual soundstage is a convolution reverb, a reverb like this room reverb, and is just give you complete and total control of your environment to where you're not seeing something like this, you're creating it. You are actually creating a hall that you can visualize, set up the room exactly you want, understand acoustics completely, room acoustics, to where you're an acoustician. You're not just applying reverb, you're actually an acoustician, and the tool will actually let you do that. But you be careful because by that time you are a pretty advanced audio engineer, and it's like, don't get lost in that if you can help it, because for the most part, if you're dealing with music, or if you're dealing with movie scores, or you're dealing with gaming systems or anything, that your convolution reverb, if it can't get it done for you, you're probably doing it wrong. You need to spend some time rewatching my videos and maybe some other further studies to really understand what you're doing. So I hope that makes it clear, so that anybody who's going, why didn't he address the other types of reverb, so that I addressed that, so that, as you really understand why I make this your next biggest gun next to your equalization, is because of the power that it has. And some of these other tools do have power. Some of these really simple reverbs, like this little mix verb, can do little things for you. These reverbs are a little bit of a more step up. Some things like this old school reverb, and as they come out with these things, start to do some really wild stuff that crosses the line between just spatialization and sound sculpting and other areas that I try to keep things simple. When I do my spatialization, I'm doing my spatialization. I'm not trying to do a bunch of other stuff. I do that in a different phase. Does that make sense? But some of them can do some really simple things, and some of them do some really cool things, but I got lost in them. I had every type of damn reverb you can imagine, and I was buying all kinds of them, and I was like, oh yeah, and then I realized why I got 35,000 different reverberations, and tools. I was like, and eventually I figured out my convolution reverb was my go-to gun. But that doesn't mean to say that I didn't learn a lot with using my room reverb like this one here about what it was doing, how well it did it, what kind of control it was going to give me, so that I could understand what was going on with my convolution reverb really well, and my echo effects and things like that, and understand the difference between three-dimensional space and a two-dimensional stereo field, and what that meant when I was mixing music. So it was a learning process, and I'm not unhappy that I didn't go through it, because I learned a lot of what all these things were trying to tell me or give me control of. But in the end, I go to my convolution reverb. Does that make sense? But now you understand my view a little bit about other reverbs, how I don't dissuade you from them, but I do not ever want them to take away the fact that your convolution reverb is your next biggest gun next to equalization, until, in my humble opinion, something like this comes out that is basically makes you an acoustician, that you are actually creating it an environment, and it does a really good job of it, which is going to be a combination of some room reverb like I showed you there, convolution reverb, and acoustical abilities of actually creating an acoustical environment for you to put your production in, which at this point, without spending a lot of money, and even if you do, is questionable whether or not they're doing that. So, you know, at this point, I really do want you to master your convolution reverb, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some other reverb things like plate reverbs, spring reverbs, boutique reverbs, things like that, and other types of reverbs that are emulating analog equipment or digital equipment, and what it's trying to tell you. And it's a great idea for you to study them because they can really help you to understand a lot better, you know, what an acoustician is, what he's trying to do, and more about room acoustics and what you can actually control and why it's important to control those things, which I hope that I've made very clear so far in the second master series. So basically, that's what I wanted to get across in this video. And we're using my new video software, Camtasia, so I hope it comes out looking pretty good. I hope you enjoy the video. I hope it comes out sounding good. And I will see you in the next video when we talk about my finished library of impulse responses and what I think you should have and what your focus will be as a separate video for it to be fairly cut and dry so that I don't leave you with a lot of questions in that area. And then we'll have some final words on our convolution and reverberation before we go on to your next biggest gun. Peace, self, love. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.